Hello everyone, Tassif here, back with another live stream. It's wonderful to see that as I'm starting this live stream, a few of my friends have already given this video thumbs up. Thank you so very much. I appreciate your support. Please, if you have not given this video thumbs up, if you have not liked this video, please do so. Give it a like, give it a thumbs up, and please participate in the live chat window. I see my friend Terry from South Dakota is here. Terry writes, South Dakota is still awake. Well, thank you, Terry. It's wonderful to know that. I'm still awake because my mind is running. There are so many things I've been thinking about, and I just can't stop thinking. And so I'm awake, South Dakota is awake, and I'm sure many others are awake. There's a lot going on in the country. There's a lot that we have to talk about, lots of information, lots of news updates that we have to analyze, lots of politicians giving different statements. We have to understand those statements, try to figure out the meaning of those statements, try to figure out their political motive behind the language that they are presenting in front of the public. And so stay with me, stay connected, give this channel, subscribe to this channel, give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to check out my other videos, okay? So stay connected with me, my friends. And before I jump right into the discussion, I want to find out who else is here. Anyone else who's here who has not participated in the live chat yet, please do so. Please do so, my friends. Terry, how are you doing? I know South Dakota is still awake, but tell me how you're doing. How are things in South Dakota? How's the weather? You know, the weather is something that I feel like we always have to talk about. You know, here in Wisconsin, it's been pretty strange. You get one day of bright and sunny weather, and then the next day you get rain. So today it was raining. Terry writes, lovely. Lovely weather in South Dakota. Wonderful to hear that. Here it's been raining, and I was home all day. I was home all day. I did not step out of my apartment for a single minute today. And so, you know, here I am. Let's see. Terry writes, very warm today, but not enough for AC. Okay, so that means it's perfect weather. Okay, it's warm, but not warm enough for AC. That's like perfect. Okay, my friends, I see I see another thumbs up for my video. Thank you so much. I appreciate your support. It means a lot to me. And my friends, I'm going to go right into the discussion now because we are past 3 minutes and 20 seconds. So, you know, as the title of the video tells you, I'm going to be talking about why a U.S. congressman asked New York governor to pardon Trump. That's my primary topic for today. And it's like unbelievable stuff we see in the news, right? You know, so let me just recap. I think it's important if we just do a quick recap of what happened so that we can all be on the same page before we go into the discussion. So here's what happened. In New York, there was a trial against Donald Trump in New York. There was a trial against Donald Trump. And who's Donald Trump? He is the former US president, and he's also the presumptive Republican nominee for president for November 2024, the presidential election. And the left, the radical left, came up with charges, and they put Donald Trump on trial. And the trial took place during campaign season. And the trial took place in a heavily Democrat city. And in that trial, a jury delivered the verdict. And what was the verdict? The verdict was guilty on all 34 counts. Does that surprise you? Does that surprise you? The trial took place in a heavily Democrat city, in a heavily Democrat state, and the defendant in the trial, who's the defendant? A former Republican US president and a presumptive Republican nominee for president. And so, of course, this was not a fair trial. And it's not just me saying that. There are lots of experts, legal experts, who will tell you that this was not a fair trial. Now, sentencing is scheduled. Sorry, my computer, the wire for my charger just fell. Okay, I fixed it. Um, Sentencing is scheduled for July, just days before the Republican National Convention. There's a lot of uncertainty about what sentencing will look like. Will Donald Trump be sentenced to prison time? Will he be subject to fines? Will he be subject to probation? What kind of restrictions may be imposed on his movement, on his travel? There are lots and lots of questions and not enough answers. And here's what happened recently. So I'm talking about yesterday and today. What happened in these 2 days? Congressman Dean Phillips wrote on social media that New York Governor Kathy Hochul should pardon Donald Trump. Wow. What a breaking news. I mean, do you need a moment to process the information? Do you want me to stop for a second? I can take a break. I can be in front of the camera and I can wait for 30 seconds while you process the information. My friend Terry is writing $54 million happened. LOL. I'm going to get to that, Terry. But I'm so glad you mentioned that. Terry is writing, Dems are seeing the writing on the wall. What a great point. You got to see the writing on the wall. The writing may be on the wall right in front of you, but if you have your eyes closed, you don't see it. If you're looking in a different direction, you don't see it. If you know the writing's there, but you don't want to see it, then you don't see it. But it's important to see the writing on the wall. Okay. Process this information because it's important. Congressman Dean Phillips wrote on social media that New York Governor Kathy Hochul should pardon Donald Trump. All right. Process it for a few seconds. It's very interesting because Dean Phillips, for those who don't know this, Dean Phillips is a Democrat congressman. He's not a Republican. He's a Democrat. Okay? He's a Democrat congressman. And he's asking Kathy Hochul, another Democrat, to pardon Trump, who is a Republican. Dean Phillips ran for president. How many of you knew that? Raise your hand if you knew that. Well, you can't really raise your hand, and even if you do, I can't see it because we're on this live stream. But really, Dean Phillips ran for president. How many of you knew about Dean Phillips? If you have been watching my YouTube channel, my videos that I publish, then you probably heard about Dean Phillips because I talked about Dean Phillips. And Dean Phillips ran for president. I think even a lot of Democrats don't know this, that Dean Phillips ran for president. So he ran for president challenging Joe Biden in a primary. And then a couple months ago, Dean Phillips dropped out of the race. Okay, so he was there running, like running on a treadmill. No, not running on a treadmill. He was running for office. He was running for president. Then he decided to drop out. Just drop out. Now, Dean Phillips is from Minnesota, as you can understand by reading my friend Terry's comment. Terry wrote, Minnesota may be blue, but they are Midwesterners. And then Terry compared Minnesota with California and New York. Terry, your comment is so interesting, Terry. I love it. Thank you so much. So, Terry writes, I just saw the headlines, but not the full story. Well, I'll discuss this in more details, Terry. So stay connected with me. Susan is here. Susan writes, hello again. Well, hello, Susan. Thanks for being here. Scott McDougall is here. Scott McDougall writes, cool. Well, Scott McDougall, is this your first time on this channel? I don't recall seeing you here on this channel before. At least, I don't think I saw you on a live stream in a live chat window before. So if this is your first time, please let me know where you're from, what city, what state. If you have been on this channel before watching my videos, then I'm glad that you're back. Thank you so much. I appreciate your participation in the live chat. So, by the way, I'm going to post my website address here. You can see www.tasifanam.net. For anyone who wants to visit my website, please do so. I would appreciate that. So, going back to the discussion, Dean Phillips is from Minnesota, and he ran for president, challenging Biden in a primary. Then Dean Phillips dropped out. And, just understand this. Dean Phillips is not a fan of Donald Trump, okay? So don't think that Dean Phillips is a fan of Trump. He's not. In fact, it seems to me that Dean Phillips dislikes Trump a lot, okay? That's just my observation. I have not spoken with Dean Phillips, okay? I've never met him. I've never talked to Dean Phillips. So, I'm just drawing conclusions from Dean Phillips's statements and, news articles that I've read. And let me tell you one other thing, which will, make it obvious that Dean Phillips does not like Trump. So on social media, Dean Phillips called Trump various names, okay? Not good names, just insulting names. So Dean Phillips called Donald Trump various insulting names on a recent social media post. But then he also wrote that the verdict, this is what he seemed to suggest, that the verdict, the guilty verdict, is energizing Donald Trump's base. The guilty verdict is resulting in record sums of campaign cash for the Trump campaign. And Dean Phillips also said that the guilty verdict will likely result in an electoral boost. That's really what's happening. Dean Phillips, being a Democrat, Dean Phillips at least has shown some signs of intelligence. Okay? By acknowledging the fact that the guilty verdict is energizing Trump's base, generating record sums of campaign cash, and will likely result in an electoral boost. But as I said, Dean Phillips called Donald Trump various names on social media, which I don't appreciate at all. Well, Dean Phillips, you should not be calling our former president by insulting names, okay? Have some respect for our former president and soon to be president, okay? So he was the 45th president, Donald Trump, And Donald Trump is also going to be the 47th president. I believe that, okay? That's my strong belief. So Dean Phillips should show respect to Donald Trump, but he did not. He called Trump insulting names. But then on the other hand, Dean Phillips, as I said, has shown some little bit of sign of intelligence, because he seemed to understand that the guilty verdict is really helping the Trump campaign, and it's resulting in electoral boost for Trump. And and fundraising has been great for Trump since the guilty verdict came out. And it is true that Republicans are energized and they are ready to win in November 2024. The radical left thought that a guilty verdict would negatively impact the Trump campaign. That's what they thought, okay? But whatever you think may not be true. And as it turned out, the guilty verdict had a completely different impact. Rather than negatively affecting the Trump campaign, the guilty verdict actually helped the Trump campaign raise more than $52 million in a day. And funds are pouring in. Funds are still pouring in. So by calling for New York Governor Kathy Hochul to pardon Trump, Dean Phillips he's not trying to do Trump any favor. In fact, Congressman Phillips is trying to dampen the momentum that the Trump campaign has right now. That's really what he's trying to do. And my friends, let's look at the practical aspects of this call for pardon by Dean Phillips. First of all, by asking New York Governor Kathy Hochul to pardon Trump, Dean Phillips has caught the media's attention. So the media is now paying attention to Dean Phillips. I mean, for those of you who don't know who Dean Phillips is, well, now you're likely to know who Dean Phillips is, from Minnesota, a congressman. It seems to me that Congressman Dean Phillips really wants to raise his political profile. His presidential campaign was an absolute failure. And so now Dean Phillips is trying to raise his profile, and he's trying to be the highlight in the news so that he can get everyone's attention. And so he's catching everyone's attention by urging Governor Kathy Hochul to pardon Donald Trump. To a great extent, Dean Phillips has succeeded in getting people's attention. I mean, think about it. Right here on this channel, we are talking about Dean Phillips. I'm telling you who Dean Phillips is. A former presidential candidate, a current congressman, and he's from Minnesota, neighboring state, because I live in Wisconsin. And so right here we are talking about Dean Phillips, and his statement, news about his social media posts, have resulted in many news articles. So more people now know who Dean Phillips is. Terry writes, Hochul won't pardon Trump. It will ruin her standing in New York. We know that, Terry. We know that. Anyone who pays attention to politics, anyone who keeps track of what's going on in the country, anyone who pays attention to contemporary affairs would know. Terry, you're absolutely right. If you pay attention, you know that Hochul won't pardon Trump, because as Terry said, it's going to ruin Kathy Hochul's standing in New York, Democrat state. And, Kathy Hochul's never going to pardon Trump. So that's just not going to happen, because Kathy Hochul is a left wing politician. The Democrats, they pushed for this sham trial to come up with a guilty verdict. That was always the goal. That was always the goal of this trial, to come up with a guilty verdict. And the judge in the case, as Trump mentioned, is conflicted. And we can talk about the DA. We can criticize the DA. There's a lot to say about the DA. There's a lot to say about the prosecution team. There's a lot to say about the judge and the judge's actions during the trial. We can talk about the jury. And, this case is just a sham. This entire thing is just a drama. And this trial was orchestrated to come up with this guilty verdict. And so the Democrats, they pushed for this sham trial to come up with a guilty verdict for Trump. And so there's no way that Kathy Hochul will pardon Trump. So it seems that Dean Phillips is not entirely happy with Joe Biden. Obviously, because if he would have been completely happy with Joe Biden, then why would he run for president? Why would Dean Phillips challenge Biden in a primary? Although that challenge was unsuccessful because Dean Phillips then dropped out of the race, but he did run against Biden. So it seems to me, and I think I am correct when I say this, that Dean Phillips is not entirely happy with Joe Biden. And because his primary challenge to Biden was unsuccessful, Phillips is now trying to establish himself as an independent voice. Okay? He's not changing his party affiliation. He's not going from being a Democrat to being an independent. But he's trying to sort of, diplomatically, he's trying to establish himself as an independent voice. And he's trying to somewhat separate himself from Joe Biden and his left-wing allies in Washington. And so Phillips has taken this approach. He has taken this approach. He's opposing Trump while also highlighting that Trump is getting an electoral boost after the guilty verdict. So Dean Phillips is really all about Dean Phillips. He's thinking about his own public standing. He's thinking about his own political future. He's thinking about his own, like he wants to get media's attention, which, he was successful this time because the topic of this live stream is what Dean Phillips said. That's the topic of today's live stream. And reporters have been writing articles about Dean Phillips and what he said. I think Phillips also knows that Kathy Hochul is not going to pardon Trump. But Phillips wants to be the highlight. He wants everyone to know who he is. He wants attention. Terry writes, maybe Phillips wants to be Democrat substitute for Biden at convention. I hear Dems don't like Newsom. Interesting point, Terry. Interesting point. I have to think about it now. Yeah, the convention. And the Democrat convention will be where? In Chicago, Illinois. The Brandon Johnson and J.B. Pritzker state. It's supposed to be the land of Lincoln, but it's actually now the land of socialists, because that's what the Democrats in Illinois are. They are socialists. They are pushing for socialist policies. And so from being the land of Lincoln, Illinois has now become really, heading towards failure. I know a lot of good conservatives in Illinois, great people, conservatives. They are trying their best to spread the message of freedom, to spread the message of fiscal responsibility, to spread the message of common sense policies, but the Republicans, the conservatives in Illinois are a minority because Illinois is a Democrat heavy state. And so that's where the convention will be for the Democrats. So Terry, going back to what you just said, is Phillips going to be, a substitute for Biden at the convention? We have to wait and see. And you mentioned a lot. You heard that a lot of Dems don't like Newsom. That may be true. That may be true. Susan writes, Hochul passed a regulation that school kids can't have smartphones at school. I haven't seen that, but thank you for mentioning that. I have to take a look at that. Susan writes, only flip phones. Good. Interesting point. I'm gonna have to look. I'm gonna have to look into it, Susan. So thanks for mentioning it. Susan writes, when Newsom made all the wineries close, he left his and Nancy's open. Okay. Well, I missed that news as well. But see, I learn a lot from the chat window. So thanks for highlighting those important points, Susan. I'm gonna look at both. Susan writes, when Newsom had the schools closed, his own children went to school. Susan, in general, we saw so much of hypocrisy, right? We saw so much of hypocrisy during the COVID lockdowns. First of all, the lockdowns should not have happened. And the lockdown sadly did happen because big government is just getting bigger. And remember when Newsom was caught enjoying a meal with his friends at a luxury restaurant without mask? Remember that? That made national news, and people were very, very upset because Newsom was forcing American citizens in California to wear masks and follow all kinds of COVID guidelines, but he was having a nice meal at a luxury restaurant, not wearing a mask and being cool and having a good time. So double standard, hypocrisy. Okay, whenever you think of Gavin Newsom, think about hypocrisy. Okay, Gavin Newsom, hypocrisy. Gavin Newsom, hypocrisy. Gavin Newsom, hypocrisy. Susan writes, Susan, you know about that whole incident, right? I mean, it was all over the news. It was all over the news. It was all over the news when Newsom went to an expensive restaurant for a meal, and he was hanging out with his friends. Terry writes, Susan, are you in California? Susan writes, Terry, yes. So Susan is in California. Susan, thank you for joining. And so, Susan, what time is it where you are? Is it 8:30 p.m. right now? Because it's 10:30 in Wisconsin. So I'm thinking it's right around 8:30 p.m. Right? Because you're probably two hours behind. 8:31 exactly. Okay, so you're 2 hours behind. So going back to Dean Phillips, interesting guy from Minnesota, opposing Trump while also highlighting the fact that Trump is getting an electoral boost after the verdict, after the guilty verdict. Because you know what? The most important thing to keep in mind is the fact that the American people, they can see the truth. They know the truth. They understand what's going on. They don't have faith. People are losing their faith when it comes to the justice system because they see An innocent man, a former president, a great president, one of the greatest presidents in American history, and the presumptive Republican nominee for president, and an innocent man, a great businessman, and an innocent man, um, found guilty, by a jury in a Democrat city, in a Democrat state. People are losing their faith in the justice system as a result of this, because people know that Trump is innocent. Susan writes, I'm having tea and popcorn. Susan, wonderful. What flavor is your tea, Susan? Is it black tea, green tea? Is it flavored or just simple tea? I'm having black tea with almond milk. I love this cup. Very, very light colored cup. Easy to hold. Terry writes, I have sunflower seeds, LOL. Oh, reminds me of sunflowers. I need to look for sunflowers. I love sunflowers, and this actually is the season for farmers market in Wisconsin. And so I'm going to have to go to the farmers market and get some sunflowers. Susan, okay, thanks for writing what flavor tea you're having. That's a good flavor. All right. So my friends, I see a lot of people have tuned in. However, not a lot have participated in the live chat window. So if you have not participated in the live chat window yet, please do so. The more questions, the more discussion, the more things we chat about, the better, because that's how this information, we learn from each other and the conversation continues. So if you have not participated in the live chat yet, please do so. And what I'm going to do is I will also write my email address in the chat window. So if you want to email me, you can. So Susan has a great question. Susan writes, do you think the Supreme Court will address Trump's case? Difficult to know, Susan. Difficult to know. I think the sooner the case goes to the Supreme Court, I think the better, because the Supreme Court, I have confidence in the Supreme Court of the United States. I think we have some great justices. I mean, think about Justice Kavanaugh, Justice Gorsuch, Justice Amy Coney Barrett, Clarence Thomas. I mean, we've got great justices on the U.S. Supreme Court. And so I have confidence in the U.S. Supreme Court. I have a lot of confidence in the decision of the U.S. Supreme Court, which is just opposite to how I feel about the New York court system. I mean, look what happened. An innocent man found guilty on 34 counts. Ridiculous. All right. Terry writes, Fix News was reporting that people were not following the Trump trials, but were more focused on the economy and border. Exactly, Terry. I mean, if the Biden camp, if the Biden administration, the radical left, if they think that Trump being found guilty in a sham trial would switch, would draw Trump supporters away from Trump, that's not going to happen, because more and more people are now going to be supporting Trump. Because you know what? Every day. Okay, so here's what matters. The wallet matters. Your bank account matters. when you go out and shop, here's my wallet. Okay, so I've got my wallet right here. I actually may need a new one. This is kind of old. But you know what? This matters. This wallet matters because every time I go to the grocery store and I take out my cash, I take out my card, and I'm making payments, I see the prices and how inflated the prices are. You know, I can go item by item by item and tell you how difficult it is to pay for stuff these days. You know, and the middle class is shrinking. The middle class is shrinking in this country because of Joe Biden's policies. You know, it's healthy to have a strong middle class for the overall economy, for the society, for a country in general. It's very healthy to have a strong middle class. Okay? But the middle class in this country is shrinking. More and more people are entering poverty, and a few people are, you know, getting rich, staying rich. You know, that's okay. If people can, you know, find success and be rich and wealthy, that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. But more and more people are going from the middle class to, you know, they are entering poverty because of Joe Biden's inflation, because of the border crisis, because of how the value of money is being eroded, because of how our tax dollars are being used. So more and more middle class Americans are becoming poor. And so the wallet matters. This thing that I carry with me, this matters. Because the impact that Joe Biden has on this wallet, okay, that's what drives the voters. For the American voter who's having difficulty buying groceries because of inflated prices, is the Trump trial, the guilty verdict, is that gonna have a really strong impact? No. I think there was some kind of a disruption in my live stream.